I am Amy Normandin. I am the Operational Support Services Manager at Nex-Tech. Quick 2-cent background. I've been with the company 21 years, in this industry for about 30. Where I fall in with the contractor communication and organization is part of my circle of responsibility includes dispatch. So for a very long time, when we would bring on a contractor, they might be hired for a specific project. They would be working for a supervisor or working with a supervisor or manager on that project. And that was kind of where we kept that circle and back and forth communication with the new contractor. Like probably many of you, we've had some very busy years. Last year was an extremely busy year for us, not only in construction projects, but some other conversion projects within our company. And so we had a lot of contractor help at one time, aside from construction side, but some of the conversions, we had as many as 8 crews from outside contractors working on various projects. And what we found at that time, which is where I got assigned this responsibility, was with all the moving parts, we found us moving contractors around kind of more the squeaky wheel syndrome of who could grab them and bring them into their project. And we felt like we needed a central point for our vendors, our contractors we were dealing with, to give them their assignments, communicate where they were going, as well as coordinate within our company on the different projects we were working on, where was the biggest need. And so I'm going to kind of discuss how we've worked through that process and things that we've learned and how we handle things. And I will very much identify with the fact that there is no slam dunk. Everything happens the same way, because even in my own experience, so many things are different, and different projects or different conversions or different cutovers. And you have to be willing to understand and swing with those changes a little bit. So that's what brings us to today. First of all, quick areas I'm going to cover, and good or bad, I tend to talk fast, so I'm going to go through some information and don't foresee us using this whole lot of time. So unless you got a lot of questions, I hope to give you some back at the end of the day. But we're going to kind of go over some communication methods, setting expectations, and some documentation, including expectations of behaviors. Some things that we've learned on technology and security that sometimes we take for granted in our world of PIP information, opportunities, ways for scheduling, and then the key, also remembering onboarding one time is not just a one-time scenario, it is ever changing, depending on how long your project is and how long you might be working with different crews. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about effective communication. There's so many ways in which to work with people in today's world. We've got video conferencing, we got emails, we got obviously your phone calls, chats, all sorts of things. So working with the contractors first, we have to figure out what is most effective for them and effective for the process. So establishing and as I kind of backtrack to how I got to this point, one thing that we learned effective communication when we are running several crews and contractors, that it was advantageous for both parties to have a point of contact to centralize that communication and help to communicate the assignments and where things were changing. One thing I have done with my crews is I kind of have an overall contact list that I shared with the people who's working in the projects, as well as the crews that are coming in. So they know who's the decision makers, not only for the overall assignments, but if they are, I tend to want to talk in towns, and it probably doesn't work well if you're not familiar with the area. So maybe I'll just call it town 1, town 2, town 3. But sometimes we move crews around. So we have that list that says not only here's the phone calls, but and the phone numbers and the emails and the people to talk to, but the people who are working in town 1, the people who are working in town 2, and then of course the centralized distribution of dispatch. The flip side of that is our employees need those contact information of the crews that are out there too. So it keeps both sides knowing, as we assign and move people around, who to contact and when. because people are on the road, they're out in the field. It's not like we're sitting in the same office. And then you're going to see them across the room from you. The other point establishing is effective timelines, what we expect on work to be completed. Understanding their work days is also important. I've worked with a couple different companies, and some work for 10-hour days, or they're welcome to work they'd like to work more than 10-hour days. Some went to 5 days a week. I've even had crews that in different areas that are open to working on Saturdays. So communicating and talking to them on what they are available to work, and also communicating what we need. One thing you're going to hear from me a lot is our company's need is important, but we have to listen to the contractor and see what they are available to. And I say that because sometimes what I want them to do, or what we thought we want them to do, they may actually be open to more and broader spectrums. The Saturday crew, for example, I never asked a crew if they could work on Saturday until we had a well-established communication, and one of the guys said, "But I can do 6 days a week, or I'd love to work on Saturdays." And like, fantastic. We could do some scheduling, and it actually was very, very well received. The other part is working with, in that effective communication, what is the comfort level of the guys in the field? For some of us who sit at a computer and we work with a lot of technology, we tend to want to use shared documents and scheduling software and calendars or applications. And we had to come up with a method that was well received by the people who are doing the scheduling, as well as easily handed off to the guys in the field. And so you have to kind of work through what is their comfort level, or something you can train them on if that needs to be, and also works well for the staff that's scheduling or working in the office and not directly with the guy right at the field. And kind of my next point there is listening to the experience and expertise of the contractor. They do this all the time. They do this type of work, depending on what you're hiring them for, whether that means fiber installation or conversions on certain technologies or installation of internet. They have done, most likely done the work that we're hiring for lots of different companies. And they may enlighten you on opportunities or ways to do things that might be better than what you initially planned. So it's interesting to listen to them. And often I find when I ask them questions, at least in the initial, that they might have been a little reluctant, or maybe they don't want to feel like they're telling you what to do. We're trying to just tell them, hey, give us some, what have you done in the past? And then still our decision, but it's nice to hear the ideas and the experience that possibly they could share with us confidentially. They're not expressing what specific companies it is, but more of the tops of the trees of things that's worked well for other projects. And then the last one I have on here, and depending on the size of the communities and the areas that you're working, you got to know your customer base. What we have found in some of our small communities is if I roll a truck into a small community and it's got an out-of-state tag, I don't care if it has a Nex-Tech logo on the side of it or not, we're going to get phone calls. People are going to wonder who it is. They're going to be suspicious. They may know they already know who the local guy who normally works there. So now there's someone else who's knocking on their door. And so there's some reluctance. So do try to take some time before you start rolling contractors into a community, especially if they're going to be going directly to the customer's door, to figure out the best strategy for communicating to your customers. Maybe that's just some social media exchanges or some various radio ads, just something to let them know, yep, we do have some people work in your area that's helping us on whatever exciting project you have. But their community awareness is important, because like I said, even in the small towns, or especially in small towns, they will definitely notice it and ask questions. And I don't know, if you can get ahead of it, you can avoid kind of that uncomfortable, almost a black eye when you're trying to do something positive for those communities. Documentation and expectations for the contractors. One thing we have done, aside from, obviously you're going to have a contract with your contractor, and your legal, your CFOs, your COOs are going to, comb through that actual contract. And obviously that's important, and an NDA as well if needed. The documentation I'm talking is more of the nuts and bolts of what they're doing specifically for the work that you've got them assigned to. So we have created a document that outlines some basic expectations, or I'm going to refer to as basic expectations, but again, these contractors have worked in lots of different places, and what Nex-Tech considers our daily expectations may be different than a different part of the country for different reasons. So if you have an expectation that if they're working at the customer's house, that they knock on the door and also call the customer's phone and leave a door tag if they're unavailable, that you explicitly tell them the things that you expect them to do when they go to the customer's house. Things that I have learned to include in that are things like mud and rain days. Some companies are very specific if their contractors or employees do or don't use a customer's bathroom. So some very, if you would think of like onboarding your technicians when you bring them into the company, there are some expectations that you will find that you might think is common sense, maybe is not the right word, but common expectations. But if you don't explicitly write it down, again, you might be surprised what is acceptable in a different part of the country to what's acceptable in your communities. So write down that general behavior and expectations, as well as specifically kind of a how-to guide or training information. Granted, there's going to be some hands-on with your local teams as well, but if it's in the document, at least they have that reference point and resources in which they have a clarity on what they're doing while they're performing the work. Some of those details may be less important if you have a contractor working on, let's say, just fiber work, alley work out in the road. This applies to me is extremely vital if you have them going into the customer's home, because they at that point they are representing your company, and you want to make sure that when they're in front of the customer, that they are portraying the image that you want, saying the phrasing of explaining the project the way that you have provided for them. Other things might be inventory, how they check in or check out inventory. Again, if this applies to your project, if you have them doing installations and they need to provide routers, are you going to let them carry 5 routers, or is your technicians, your local people, just going to provide them one router per install? So thinking through how you want them to handle the job that you've hired them for, and then documenting that out so that not just the company as a contract has it, but the individuals coming into the community have a digital or printed document that expressly tells them what you are expecting of them, not just a contract that's hired with or signed with the upper people in the company. Now, behaviors, kind of similar to the documentation, and also could be in there. What we at Nex-Tech, we provide, if they're going into the customer's home, we do provide the contractors with a shirt that is logoed with our company brand. We also provide them like the magnets or decals for their vehicles. So that way when they're on the streets, people know that they are here with us. That works really great. If they're going to be on your project a long time, do expect that you're probably going to have to replace those. Things blow off as they drive down the road. The other thing I found is asking the local guy or our local employees to keep an eye out as well, because sometimes they fall off and someone doesn't notice it. So if you have your local technicians who are a little more working side by side compared to the guy in dispatch, is kind of visualizing when they see their trucks, the logo's there, the logo looks correct, it's not sitting halfway falling off the vehicle or peeling off. Are they wearing the shirts? Are the shirts clean or stained? The project runs long, things do happen. Do we need to replace them? The other part of that is, what's their behavior when they're not at work? Should that logo still be on the vehicle? Should they still be wearing it when they're walking around outside of, in the evenings and in your community? So trying to set that expectation on how they're going to represent your company. and have a plan for watching for that representation while they're working in your communities. Technology and security. This is something that has obviously been a growing concern. Cybersecurity constantly is on everybody's mind. I know in our company we put a lot of thought and weight into it, and sometimes we forget about it in the simple things. If we're communicating with our contractors, it's really easy to just give them the cut sheets and hand them all the information that pertains to that job. It feels very transparent, also very simple. What we have tried to peel back, and as our cybersecurity analyst kind of comes in, says, no, you just don't get your head in any more information than you need to. We don't, and it's not because you personally are, don't trust the individual, but you are limiting your digital exposure or your printed exposure of that customer information. So sure, they're going to need names, addresses, and a contact phone number, but they may not need passwords, or maybe they do need passwords. But what is your expectation for letting them have that availability and then removing that access when they no longer need it? Just constantly be thinking of what you're giving to an employee or an individual who's not an employee of your company, and how that does or does not violate all of our various entities, whether that's PIP, PIC, CP&I. If you have them going into businesses, for example, do you have an NDA with that individual? We have situations, if it's a medical facility, then maybe you don't want to send a contractor in there if there's HIPAA requirements and you haven't authorized them and those sides. So we tend to kind of just bowl through and throw our resources at a project, and then we got to take that moment, that pause to go, okay, what customer private information are we providing that is necessary versus simply just providing them, like I said, the full cut sheet of information. With that is removing those documents when they don't need it anymore. So if you've provided shared, whether it's in their schedule or however you're handing off a schedule for the day, is there a way to remove it? You don't want to send something to them in email, because once they have an attachment in email, they have it forever. But if you can do a shared document, you can remove access. You can limit it to the installs for the day and then archive off information that was already done. So be thinking of how to, again, reduce your digital exposure, your private exposure, and risk to the greater entities. Appointment scheduling. There's lots of ways to do this. You're going to have to discuss with your contractor as well as your employees what's the best way to do it. It all depends on the kind of the work needs to be done. You may be lucky and you have an application in which you can add in outside contractors and use the same scheduling applications that you do with your own employees. That's fantastic. I love when that works out that way. Some contractors have their own scheduling application, and then you may have to work with their dispatch group and sharing what's scheduled, and then they're providing it within their own system. Taking a step back into our previous conversation about security, make sure you have that discussion. If they're putting information into their system for our customers, discussing what they're actually uploading versus just times and addresses. So just again, always thinking about security with it. The other part is billing. Depending on how your contract goes, some contractors may do by appointments, it might be by the hour, but you want to have a way that when you get those invoices and you have your scheduling, you can validate a reasonable validation that the billing lines up with how you've agreed to track and report the hours. So all of those, I'm not sure I can give you in a specific way, here's the best way to do it, as opposed to knowing that, put some thought into what information you're providing it, the simplicity for your employees. If your employees, your dispatch is the people scheduling for them, what's best received at their employees can also flow and not make things too complicated. And how you can use that data and how you're tracking that to validate the invoicing that you get with the contractor when the work is completed. Offboarding. We talk a lot about bringing contractors on and the contracts and setting expectations and logos, but if you have a contractor that's going to be working with you for a long period of time, the crews, we had as many as 8 crews at one time. I currently have 4 crews that we're managing specifically for a project through our dispatch group. This has been a year and a half. And in that year and a half, the technicians may have changed in that group. So when a new technician comes off or technicians leave, we still have to kind of go through a similar process. Do they have, obviously the contract's done with the company we've hired, but the technician or that is working on that crew, did they get shirts? Did they get their logos on their vehicle? Has someone from our company, whether it's the local access technician who's meeting with them or myself, talked to them and gone through that actual documentation that we discussed earlier? You know, have they been brought up to speed and you know that they've heard all the information? Because if I just brought a crew on here a little over a week ago, and you can't take for granted that the guy who's new to the company got all that back history and set that expectation clearly. Yes, the contractor, the company that you're hiring, has that responsibility, but I like to kind of check and balance and be sure that they've heard it from us as well. So we're all on the same page in the end. The other part is communicating with our own employees when technicians change. If Bob is gone and Sally is on, then they know that Bob is no longer with us, that crew is not working, and so forth. Also making sure if you're using any kind of shared docs when someone leaves, you're removing those addresses from those projects so they don't have access to the different documentation. If you have any email distributions, that you're removing the older technician and adding in the new technician, and any other weekly check-ins that you've got all the new additions and changes with it. So onboarding and offboarding is pretty much ongoing if that's project going to be more than weeks, months at a time. And those are a lot of quick highlights, and I know I kind of just rattled through lots of information and at very tops of the trees. There's lots of different reasons you may be hiring contracting work. If it's very specific in engineering and laying fiber, then some of the points I covered today doesn't quite apply the same way. This really probably presses more towards, you know, technicians that are hired for contract specifically to in-home or in-business work. So I just want to make sure I'm covering all my bases.